Alrighty, so here is our Mirandus preparation guide, and lots of cool new information in this, lots of never seen before content and the like. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a Mirandus world map, and this is generated by looking at all of the zone data in the game files and trying to reconstruct how it looks. It isn't 100% accurate, but does provide a fairly reasonable overall representation, and the previous Mirandus dev, Jason Hughes, did confirm that this is very close to the way that Mirandus actually looks like. Next is we'll have detailed maps of every zone that we know of, including the Rolling Hills zone, which isn't part of the main map, but it's quite likely they could add that as one of the maps on the initial launch because it's already a fully fleshed out zone. And then we'll have some 30-second to 2-minute videos with each zone just to kind of give some highlights and have a feel for what that zone is particularly like. And while that's happening, I'll describe some information of what happened with the playtest, what you can expect from the zones, and then some final preparation thoughts of what I expect the game to actually consist of at the time of launch in just a few days' time here. Next up here is the map that was created of Mirandus, and we'll go through each of the areas. So on the far right is the Citadel of the Sun. That was part of the playtest from last year, and to get to that you started on Narrows Landing Beach and you entered the Citadel Sun, or you could go from Narrows Landing Beach to Narrows Landing. You can see how they're connected. Now, in a hidden area within Narrows Landing was the access region to Bastille and also the access region to Splinterwood. And there's also a dungeon within Narrows Landing that wasn't accessible at that time. We'll go into that as well. Now, there's a few other zones, as you can see how they're connected. Some important ones will be King's March and Splinterwood, and I expect at least King's March to be a part of this next permanent release, and potentially Splinterwood some point down the line, and then all the other ones as you can see. And where they're connected, that's from their portals within each zone to the next zone and their approximate locations. The actual map is a perfect grid, so they're not on these angles like you're seeing in this created image, but this is very close to how they're all arranged, and the connections at least are accurate based on the available game data. Okay, so this is the first zone when you step in, and most likely will be the first zone of this upcoming playtest. In the bottom right there you can see the starting spawn, and this zone is called Narrows Landing Beach, which is pretty empty. On the original playtest, the only thing that it had were some rabbits, some instance portals, and some pine trees. And the beach goes all the way around the actual Citadel portion of the Citadel of the Sun. And in the very north part behind the actual tower there was a cave, and that cave got closed off for some reason very early in the 2023 playtest, and very few people got to actually explore it. So there's not a whole lot in this zone. The main thing is that you have two places that you can go. You can enter the Citadel of the Sun, which is the most direct route, or you can kind of go to the right to actual Narrows Landing itself, and that's where you would fight Mother and the Wisp, and we'll get to that in a bit. Now here is the actual Narrows Landing Beach itself, and what we're really looking for here is just have a good look around the zone, kind of have a feel for where it is. Now where we're actually starting here is on the opposite side from where you would typically start the zone, and this is simply for continuity. And here's the actual beach itself. The waves and the wind is a bit loud. I'm aware of that. You can see there's some harvestable pine trees there on the left, and mostly it's just empty space. At one point there was a picture of like a large potential crab boss and stuff, and I think at some point you might see that actually implemented, but at the present it's pretty much just an open area with loud loud wind and waves. Still pretty though. Nice picturesque area. No, not a whole lot to see. Again, you can see some more pine trees here, and you see a little rabbit, which is the only mob that you find in this area. Right ahead of us there. And this little entrance area is kind of the river that goes into the entrance of the Citadel of the Sun, and There was one playtest in the far distance. You could see a kraken out in the ocean area there. Directly ahead of us is a caravel, which is the largest ship within Mirandus, and we have one of those within the guild, and from there you kind of get off the caravel and you start on the beach. And from the beach you typically would go kind of up the path to the Citadel of the Sun entrance, which you can see the castle entrance to the top left there. So not a whole lot to do in this zone. Now this here is the actual Citadel of the Sun map itself. So the far left is the Citadel of the Sun, which is the deed owner's home of the Citadel of the Sun, and that has its own little entrance. And there's 3 entrances to the actual Citadel, and potentially a 4th. So there's the one at the bottom there that goes to the Narrows Landing Beach, which was the zone we just saw. The far one to the right is Narrows Landing. That's the zone with Mother and the Wisp and a bunch of other things. The courtyard is kind of where all of your crafting and stuff would take place on the playtests, and that's just south of where the farming and ranching and all that is as well. And there's kind of like 2 sections. There's like a crafting area, and then to the left of that there's another big area which is mostly just empty buildings, and that's most likely for expansion and kind of just looks and such. The far north area that you can see there, which is actually, this map is actually upside down compared to normal directions. That's actually the south side where it says future entrance, and I suspect that would potentially go to either Splinterwood or maybe Broken Mast. Other than that, you're not really seeing a whole lot on this map, and we'll continue on. Here we have the entrance of the Citadel of the Sun. This is from the Narrows Landing portion. And let's just kind of have a quick little idea of kind of some of the major highlights of it. So, a lot of brutes used to be here during the playtest. You can kind of hear my background from my actual recording as well. So this here is the courtyard area, and you can see some 5x5s of various types: woodworking stand, bread stand, a meat stand. There's a simple forge right ahead of us there. That's a grand tavern. You have some other, like this is a 20x40 plot you could use for any of the majestics. And kind of just give an idea of this particular region. Shame I didn't actually go inside the tavern there. So this here next is the Narrows Landing map, and most people wouldn't have seen quite this view of things. Of course, we have Bob Ross himself resurrected from the grave to make our maps for us, so that's a lucky thing about being in Mom. Anyway, the Citadel of the Sun entrance, which we just saw in that video, started with the C on the far right. A little bit above that is, you see D, that's a Narrows Landing dungeon, which wasn't accessible. There's a bunch of little outposts around. There's 3 healing tents, which you can see with the red letter T. There's a bunch of different portals. The Wisp is up to the north. The northwest you have Mother's little grove there as well. A few things people probably wouldn't notice: between the Deerfield and the Wolf Cave, that little open area there, you kind of go down into the valley. There's actually a pathway there that goes to Splinterwood, which people probably didn't know. You can see where the S is, and then there through the mountains there's a path. And the same thing with the outpost on the far west going towards the B. That's Bastial, and Bastial's kind of the center point of all of the Mirandus continent, and there's a path to go through there as well. And interestingly enough, Bastial is the image of the Mirandus icon when you log into Mirandus on Gala's website, which is interesting to note. The far north also has Portcullis, which is another zone that we don't have a whole lot of information on, but the entrance to that is up through the trees just west of the Wisp area. Now this video here, there's a lot of stuff I could show on Narrows Landing because it's quite a large zone, but I decided to kind of show the biggest highlight. And here's a raid. This is not our first raid. This is a bit later on when we're kind of a little more accustomed to what was actually happening. And you can see there we're fighting a goblin, and in the back there was this, it looks like a goblin hunter there. They go down pretty quick. They hit pretty hard though, the goblin hunters. There's a looks like either a brute or probably a mega brute in the background. And I'm sure there's some people trying to kite mobs into us to kill us, most likely Everglen. Yeah, that's Everglen for sure. Mega brute and a bunch of wolves. but not like it's going to make any difference. So the kind of the goal here is to just rush Mother, because she has really, really low hit points, despite being incredibly powerful. So you'll see here, that's Mother there glowing, and why she's glowing is because we have so many lanterns of the suns that they reflect off of her, and she kind of glows like that. Now it's a big... Oh, there, she dropped already. You see, she lasts maybe like 20 seconds. I tried to loot it, but because of my lag, all I got was that far. Now this next portion is the map of King's March, and I suspect very few people have seen this map because this zone hasn't been released yet. Nonetheless, with the game files, I was able to use a coordinate grid overlay to kind of get an idea of where everything is. So right at the top of the map there is the start zone, and I apologize that there's no actual clear colored topographics. When the game launches, I'm sure someone in our guild will come up with a really nice map in that regard, and I'll make a video and post that in due time. After that, you kind of go down to the southeast to the starter outpost. You can go to the village, and there's also a few major portals around. So there's a portal to Bastion at the very south, which is listed as G, and the portal to the portcullis in the far northeast, which is listed as D. Now there's a few important outposts. There's actually 4 major outposts, which are kind of stopover points you can gear up and work towards collecting materials and resources to craft better equipment, kind of to push into the next zone. And that's kind of really the goal here. I'm not sure who the big boss is of this zone, or if there even is a big boss, but this is quite a nice zone. They've had a lot of various images and videos and such, and this zone was supposed to be released already, but due to Mirandus being accelerated in a negative direction, this hasn't been done as of yet. With regards to all the buildings, these were the buildings that were designed by the previous Mirandus team. Whether or not all the same buildings or if they're in the same positions remains upon this actually releasing from the new Chilean team. That I can't be 100% sure of, but this is accurate as of what was currently in the game files. Now this here is a video from the old Mirandus team of kind of a sneak peek of what the zone for King's March would be. Now they said it was King March. I almost think this is closer to Splinterwood given the fact that you can see the Citadel of the Sun Tower in the background, but they were referring to it as King's March, so I will take it as such. And here you're kind of in like a little river valley, which is quite interesting, surrounded by trees, and there were also some other images that there were a ton of goblins in this area, so a fairly dangerous area. And you also have a nice set of kind of pretty waterfalls surrounding the area as well. So this kind of what I'd picture would be kind of a good area for like a boss or a secret or something. And then you have all these like ancient temples and ruins and ruined areas. So yeah, an interesting zone. Next up we have the Rolling Hills, and this was from the last playtest, which was the first playtest released by the Chilean team, though the zone was developed by the previous American Mirandus team. And it's kind of just a circular area. You start in the northeast out next to Outpost 1, and then you go all the way around. You kill some rabbits and wolves and deer and all that, and eventually you go to where you see the pathway up to the Golden Rabbit. And the goal of that playtest was to simply kill the Golden Rabbit. Now the Golden Rabbit, as you know, dropped a ruby, and I hope they keep this in. Even though this is not part of the normal Mirandus map, it'd be kind of interesting to keep there. Now there is Mother and a bunch of other higher tier goblins that were kind of roaming around. I don't expect them to stay there, although I wouldn't really complain if they did, because they're really easy kills. They don't move really at all, so they just let you kill them. So yeah, the Rolling Hills map, and of course this is a decent quality map to kind of get a good idea of what this zone actually looks like. Now this here is actually just a short clip with the audio muted from a previous video that I made of a detailed comprehensive guide from the new Chilean dev playtest. As you can see, this is also known as the Milestone 1 playtest. And this is just kind of getting an idea of what the zone looks like. It's not particularly exciting. It's fairly empty actually. There are some mobs and stuff that you fight, mostly just deer. There's not a lot that's really threatening until you get to the wolf area, and then it becomes ridiculous because they kill you in like 2 hits. Now the bucks can kill you in 1 hit, but they're not terribly aggressive. It's mostly to test out the crafting, the looting, and testing out the server capabilities and stuff for this zone. But yeah, overall a decent, it's a fairly pretty zone. It's getting a bit dark here, so you're not getting a really great view of it, but still respectable nonetheless. And there's a bunch of outposts. Oh yeah, and you can see that guy fly hacking, which I think I mentioned in my previous video. There's always somebody fly hacking in this zone for whatever reason. And yeah, and this is just coming into one of the outposts here. Now this map here, I don't have any topographics whatsoever because they didn't exist in the game files. With that said, I do have the coordinates and locations of all the buildings and all the deeds, etc. And as you can see here, there's a series of 4 outposts. There's 2 Village of the Earls, and there's a Town of the Prince. Now the images here are the RPG Maker maps, but they're using the old designs, not the new work in progress designs. And the reason for that is my expectation is they probably release this zone as is with the old designs. That's assuming it gets released with this launch in the next couple of days. If they actually wait and completely build it up, then I would expect them to use the new designs. Interestingly enough, from this map though, you can see a few different areas. So the north is the Narrows Landing teleport, and that was just west of the Wolf Cave from the Narrows Landing map. And you also have Broken Mast to the east, and you have Ardent Horn to the west, which you can see is the A there. So a decent area. Your starting point would be almost right in the middle of the zone. So my guess is you kind of work from the outposts, kind of work into the villages, and slowly work your way north towards the other outposts, and finally gearing up at, say, the Town of the Prince to move to whoever the big baddie is of this particular zone. And I'm quite interested in this. And we did actually see some screenshots that they confirmed were from Splinterwood, but there wasn't any videos or any really good details, and the only really good video of this zone was the Town of the Prince itself. But because the new team is changing the layouts to the deed, I didn't feel that it was worth including that particular video, because the probability of it getting either released like this or the probability of it staying in that version would be fairly unlikely. And now just some final thoughts. So a fairly short video, just to kind of give an overview of what you could potentially expect, and the current team hasn't given us really significant details, so some of this may apply, some of this may not apply yet, but will likely apply in the future. Certainly all those zones definitely do exist within the game and are being built, and the team has mentioned the names King March and Splinterwood, so they are developing those zones. To play in the playtest, you absolutely must have an exemplar, so if you want to play and you don't have an exemplar, now would be a really good time to actually acquire one, which you can get one off OpenSea or potentially off of NFT Harbor on Galachain. It's worth reviewing some of the mom videos on exemplars and buildings. You can review the deeds as well, however the deeds are currently being changed, so that would be of lesser value. To get some better details of kind of all of what we know about Mirandus to date, the Mirandus Hub is a very good resource, and I would definitely recommend that. A simple Google search can get you to that. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to this Mirandus launch, and hopefully this here they build on to try to build up some hype and actually make a good game. What I'm hoping they don't do is simply release it like this and then abandon it like they did with Echoes of Empire and essentially did with Legacy, etc., just as an excuse to say, yes, the game is out and we provided our bare minimum legal obligations. So best of luck to everyone who's about to play, and I look forward to joining in the game.